Guys, I'm super excited today. I get to interview my coach, my EOS coach, James Ashcroft. And, I want to launch right in and talk about your background story, your origin story. So between 2002 and 2016, you were the president of a construction projects and logistics company. And your biography indicates that around 2012, you felt that, things weren't running in the way that you wanted. Maybe it was work life balance. What were some of the changes that you made to your personal and professional life?
Oh, Chris, thanks for asking, and thanks for having me as well. So, going back pre 2012, I think I was a lot like other entrepreneurs, just running like a chicken with its head cut off a bit, and not taking care of some of the priorities in my life. And one of those was health, right? I was about 40 pounds heavier than I am right now. Minimal exercise, eating too much, drinking too much, just living this kind of youthful, unhealthy lifestyle, and just got to a point where I had to say to myself, like, what are some of my priorities? What are some of my goals? And what do I need to fix in my life? So I started this journey where I quit drinking alcohol, started taking care of my health, started reading more, which was a big one. And then I decided to really challenge myself. And I was heavily inspired by an author named Rich Roll, reading all about these triathlons and all this crazy stuff this recovering alcoholic was doing. And woke up one day basically and said, I'm going to do something absolutely crazy. And I signed up for a half Ironman. That was about 4 months away, and I'd ridden my bike. I had a road bike, and rode my bike with some buddies in Florida. But then I decided I was going to start taking up running. And after the first night of running up my street, huffing and puffing, and almost having a coronary, I was like, I've got a long way to go here. But I did it. I trained, and I ran, and I incrementally improved. And about 4 months later, I crossed the half Ironman finish line in Miami, where I was living at the time. And it kind of kicked off this readjustment, this mental readjustment, saying, maybe my limitations are all in my head. Wonder what else I can do. So I decided after that to sign up for a full Ironman. And in the end of 2013, after hiring a coach, we can get into that later on. This was really my pivot point in my thinking about what I was capable of, what I wanted to achieve, and having that objective third party with me to guide me. I ended up crossing that finish line at the end of 2013 after 12 hours and 54 minutes of swimming, riding my bike, and running. And I haven't looked back since. It's just been an amazing journey, and we can go in any direction from here, Chris.
Yeah, no, that's incredible, and I think it's who you are has changed, right? So now you're an athlete, you're a runner, and so now it's part of your life. I imagine when you first put that deadline in the calendar, you're probably scared as hell, especially after that first run. But that shows incredible resilience, and that's amazing. So take me, how did that affect? And I wasn't going to go this direction, but how did that affect your mindset and your you as a business professional after you made kind of these lifestyle changes?
Well, the biggest thing, and I mentioned it before, was hiring a coach, right? I was I had enough awareness at the time. It was such a big challenge for me to take on. I really had no choice, right? Specifically, I'm talking about the full Ironman triathlon, right? It's for the listeners not up to speed on Ironman. It's a 2.4 mile swim, ocean swim, 112-mile bike ride, and then a full marathon, 26.2 miles, right? It seems so big and out of my wheelhouse. I actually thought about these amazing words that the great coach Jack Daly said. He always says, model the masters, right? Go find someone who's done what you want to do and just model them, right? And so I found a coach who was a professional triathlete who had done countless Ironman races. And I said, hey, listen, I'm willing to do the work. Can you just design the plans? Can you build the framework for me to succeed, right? And so when I look back on that, that was the hack. That was the plan for me to do this. And it really opened up my eyes to getting a coach in any aspect of my life. And then when I say coach, I also just mean mentors, like being around the right people, right? like masterminds are great. Getting in a room
Absolutely.
with people like, and you truly do want to be the dumbest guy in the room, right? Surrounding yourself, when you look around, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm around these people, and it elevates your game, right? You learn the smart cuts, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's a one-on-one coach for Ironman, whether it's a one-on-one coach for nutrition, whether it's a one-on-one coach, for your business, just having that wisdom on your team is just invaluable. So that's my big takeaway. So I started incorporating coaches into all aspects of my life, right? And mentors. I think it's really important to have mentors, even physical mentors, like relationships you have. And then also, I call them virtual mentors, right? Maybe they don't even know that you're they're your mentor, but it's just like getting their thinking inside your head and saying, what would this person do? What do I think they would do um, in this situation? And then leaning into that has just been incredibly valuable. And that really kind of started my journey into coaching.
Yeah, so there's so many takeaways there, and I always think of myself like when I started, working with you, and I was like, how can I apply this to my personal life? And I would make excuses up to not go to the gym, but when I got a personal trainer, I don't miss meetings, right? So I don't
I've
miss
heard the same.
meetings and I don't want to let them down. So it's holds you accountable. I've never had that situation where you had to force me to work because I really truly enjoy and love business. But for me, the personal, the health side. So that seems very interesting. You got the triathlon coach, and I see some to extreme less degree, but it's really helping me a lot as well.
Well, the key word there is the accountability, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's having that accountability. I felt the same way with my coach, even though he wasn't a taskmaster style of coach. I didn't need that. I just needed someone to send me the plan. But I felt like I didn't want to let him down either,
Right.
right? So just to have that accountability, um, me personally, on a personal note, I need accountability. I tend to wiggle out of things unless I have that structure. So I know that about myself, right? If I have a challenge, I need an accountability partner, a coach. I just think that's very important and highly underrated, to be honest with you. You know?
Completely agree. And let's kind of jump ahead. So, now you're a certified EOS implementer, and we're rankings as a traction agency. We work with you. We work, we implement EOS, and we've had some other EOS guests on. And what first of all drew you to EOS specifically? And if you could just give like just a super broad overview for those listening who aren't aware of EOS of what it is.
Yeah, so EOS is a business operating system. It's one of a handful out there, right? It's just a framework to follow, proven practical tools and ways of thinking to bring an organization together. And I work with leadership teams, okay? Come together, speak a common language, but most importantly, share the same vision, you understand what great people within the organization really means, right? So we have tools that we can then objectively look at what great means. Could develop scorecards so we can run the business on a weekly basis using a lot of leading measurables. Really manage the business to the measurables. Ways to issue clear, set up processes, have effective meetings. It's just a turnkey framework for businesses. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna ask a few questions out there, so in terms of there's a lot of individuals that are trying to self-implement, or maybe they're looking at selecting an EOS coach. What do you think differentiates you from other EOS coaches out there? And then I'll actually, since we work with you now, I'll give you my opinion as well, but I kind of wanted to hear this from you.
Oh, wow. So I truly believe, Chris, that the most important thing is chemistry. So it's probably not the sexiest answer, but it's just me being me, right? I have my own unique experiences, my own take on things, right? And assuming any coach has the credentials and has the sessions under their belt, so to speak, and um, you know if you're comparing apples to apples in that sense, then the differentiator is just the chemistry between the teams. I'm going to spend a lot of time with you, And as you know, on my objectives for every day, like the number one thing is have fun. Because I truly believe that we should be having fun as entrepreneurs, right? We're building, we get to create for the world, create this value within the world, make an impact and work together in these amazing teams. We should be having fun. So I try
Mhm.
to bring an element of that to it, and just my own experience, and I'm truly invested in team health. I mean, that's the big, I would say, cornerstone of my coaching offering is elevating that team health. I put a tremendous emphasis on it because I just enjoy when seeing a great team work together. So it's just, I think, me being me, and I'm not the right implementer for everybody. you
Mhm.
know I mean, I know other implementers, very successful implementers, who are very tough on the teams. They're, by the book and put the hammer down, and certain teams are looking for that, right?
Right.
So when you go out looking for an implementer, you should really be thinking, like, what do I want? Do I want someone who kind of jokes along with the team and kind of fits like the team chemistry, in a sense of like being one of the team members? Or do I want someone to come in a room and just lay the hammer down? And what do we need as a team? What will
Right.
benefit us? So I have my own style, and obviously we fit rankings, and me fit, and my other clients we fit, and there are other teams I just wouldn't be a right fit for. So I would tell teams to look for that right fit.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you one other big differentiator specifically when we looked at, in this for an EOS implementer was your ability to do the EOS chairing, the implementation via Zoom.
Mm,
So I had looked locally and there was a big backlog for months and months and months. So we couldn't start. It was going to take forever. Also, my entire team was remote. So I was just thinking of the logistics of flying everyone in and those additional costs and things of that nature. So I would say another big differentiator and specifically for us, because I've looked locally, was I wasn't aware of someone that did the US implementation via Zoom. It's particularly how important it was, with coronavirus and all the situation that occurred, in 2020 and what's still occurring. And so I just kind of wanted to share that with you too. And so I wanted to jump right in and discuss, what are some of the particular elements of EOS that businesses regularly find difficult to take action on?
so I'm I thought about this, and I think about it all the time. I think the hardest part, like I'm going to say pre-EOS, but pre bringing in a coach, no matter what operating system you're on, or however you look at it, is just having those hard conversations, right? When you don't have a facilitator in the room, sometimes it doesn't feel like the lack of a better word, a safe space, right? I mean, I probably had two sessions this week where we had very tough conversations that I don't believe would have happened if I wasn't in the room. Not because I'm special, but it's because I was aware of the situation. They felt accountable to the promise that we made together, right? To be, as you know, Chris, open and honest, right? Open to each other's perspective, opening to changing your mind, and honest, saying what you need to say. And so having that element in the room, having these tough conversations, that clears the deck completely. Because if they are not had these hard conversations, then they can sometimes be seeds for cancers within the team, right? So having the hard conversations and developing those over time is absolutely critical. And then I think the other piece is patience, right? I have a lot of teams who just want that they've read the book, and go through the first 2 days and like, come on, come on, come on, let's speed this process up. And I'm specifically talking about visionaries, right? Chris, you can probably relate to this, right? You want everything
A bit.
yesterday, right?
A bit, yes.
Yeah. So my job is to come in there and say, hey, listen, let's slow down. I say it all the time, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint. You're literally at mile 2 of a 26-mile marathon. Let's just slow down. You haven't gotten here overnight. You're not going to fix everything overnight. Slow down. So I think those two, having hard conversations and patience, whether or not you're self-implementing, and even see it with teams that I'm implementing, that's a lot that I'm managing, or managing to, right? like enabling that safe space for them to have those hard conversations. That's why I repeat every session, open and honest, open and honest. And if you're sitting there kind of biting your tongue, it's an issue in the business. So we need to get that issue on the issues list sooner than later and fix it. So those would be two things.
Yeah, I completely agree. I also find, just from a unique perspective, of when you're chairing and someone goes on a tangent, you have the ability to rein them in. When sometimes, if I'm chairing our weekly meeting, I feel kind of like an a-hole, maybe doing it too frequently. But when it's someone else, it's nice to have that just objective third party to kind of rein in and guide the meeting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, you're the owner of the company, right? So not everyone's going to tell you what they think honestly all the time. So having that third party in there that demands this happens, meaning everyone speaks honestly and openly, is a very powerful piece of bringing in a coach to guide you through a process.
Absolutely. And the next thing I wanted to talk about, and this has been a real challenge for me, and now it's kind of a pet peeve after you've taught us, you've opened my eyes in regards to core values. And I wanted to kind of hear basically your thoughts and your opinions on individuals selecting core values, and basically your take on it, because I thought it was really unique. And now that you've explained this, I start to identify a lot of aspirational type values when I see them on the web. Could you kind of explain your take on core values?
Yeah, well, first of all, this isn't my take. This is Patrick Lencioni has a great article called "Make Your Values Mean Something." He dives into all of this just beautifully, right? And we all talk about core values and this bucket, and I think most people think they're talking about core values. They're talking about values across the board. Most don't realize there are different types of values, right? Core values are the cultural cornerstones, the foundation of the soul of an organization, right? The non-negotiables that never change. Okay. There are other types of values, such as permission to play values, right? Those are the minimal standards of acceptable behavior, right? So when I hear companies saying, "Yeah, one of our core values is honesty," it's like, well, isn't that kind of like table stakes? Like we should all be honest. It doesn't really tell us anything, right? There's also accidental core values. So maybe one of so-called core values is fun or cool. You have to ask yourself, is that really who you are, or is that just a product of where you've come from and where you are now? And in that article, they have a great example of this young trendy firm, right? And that they made that one of their core values, like young and trendy, right? But the problem was then excluded people who perhaps weren't considered young and trendy, and that could impact the business in a negative way. And so, after much reflection, they realized that young and trendy was just accidental. It's just who they happen to have in the building, right? And they pivoted away from that. Now it's the business has flourished because they removed that value. And then the third one is these, which you referenced, was the aspirational, right? This is who we want to become. We want to be about work-life balance. Well, if you're a company that's not really into work-life balance, you're a hard-charging like PE firm or something, right? Like that's just aspirational, right? There's a value there. Maybe you build the strategy around moving to being more work-life balance, right? But it's not like really who you are. So I take my clients to a whole core values workshop where we identify all these values. We, use a lot of sticky notes and everyone writes out thinking about the best employees or looking to the person next to them on the leadership team, some of the characteristics they admire in them. And then we kind of filter out using Patrick Lencioni's aspirational, accidental, and permission to play values. And it leaves a board of potential core values. And then we dial it in and go through the theme process. And I know you can speak to your own experience going through this too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Going through this experience and really identifying our values, what we embodied versus those aspirational. One of the things, even it's an ongoing process, right? So we ended up with send and delete, fine as the F word, and then don't be an asshole. But we started thinking about this. Do we really want to wear on a t-shirt, don't be an asshole, or fine as the F word? It's kind of the negative. So now we're in a process of flipping those to a positive, whether it's something about excellence, more of a positive versus fine as the F word, or maybe team player as opposed to don't be an asshole. So it's been this iterative process that I thought we were going to nail it, but it just continues to evolve.
Yeah, and I tell my clients that too, before we do our core values workshop. Like, I certainly have clients where after, an afternoon, we're like, we've hit the holy grail, right? It was right there, we got it. But other times it takes a marination process, or taking it back within the organization, which I highly recommend, like going in and talking to the teams and saying, this is what we're thinking. Can we get your feedback on it? Does this sit right well with you? And oftentimes what's happening to you is the normal thing. It comes back and was like, we need to flip it around. We don't like the negative connotation, and look at the opposite of that. But it does take time, and it is a marination. And also goes back to doing the core values process yourself, especially as you as the leader of the organization. Can be very tricky too, because you can be subtly pushing for what you think the core values are. And so having that facilitator in the room who says, hey, Chris, hold on a second, I want to hear what Stephen has to say or Sonia has to say, because they're kind of squirming in their seats a bit when you said that. And that would not happen if you didn't have that facilitator in the room. And I want to hear what they have to say. And often, the core values, the right ones, end up being different from the one the owner of the company was either thinking they were or pushing for, right? So it is so important because, as you know, Chris, we build a big part of the people side, the right fit for the organization based on the core values. We've got to get those right.
Yeah, I think it's a key ingredient to the right people on the bus. Get the right people on the bus, get the wrong ones off the bus, and like, how do you evaluate an individual's values and if they synergize with your team? And I think when you kind of understand those, you put more weight to those values, and you can actually look at those a little bit more objectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of want to jump over to the BHAGs. Being a DI driver, when I go to think of setting these 10-year goals, it just seems like it, to put a revenue goal, it just seems crazy. It's 10 years in the future. We're moving so fast. So first, why do you think a BHAG is important? And what are maybe some alternatives to setting a revenue target for your BHAG? And I guess we need to explain what a BHAG is as well.
Yeah, so BHAG is Jim Collins's term from Built to Last, which is a great book. Author of also Good to Great, which is just every business owner should read those books. It means big, hairy, audacious goal. And Jim Collins, when he was looking at these companies that had gone from good to great, he noticed a common thread, and that was that they all had this long-term vision for the business, right? And I liken it to standing at the foothills of the Himalayas, looking up to the summit of Mount Everest and saying, this is where we're going. We don't know how we're going to get there, whether we're going to make it or not, but that's where we're going, right? And Jim Collins had interesting conversations with the leaders after they left the companies and they achieved their goals, and said, so come on, let's have an honest conversation. How confident were you that you gonna hit that goal? And they were like, oh, it was so fuzzy and out there. It was like 50-50, you know, but it just set the direction for the business, right? They said, we want to build this. We want to get there to that summit. So just think of it like looking around at base camp and saying, hey, who wants to pack on some gear and take this ride with us? It's a rally cry, right? It's a directional rally cry. And practically what it does, then it allows you to then reverse engineer, right? You can say, this is where we're going in the next 10 years. And when we say BHAG, by the way, just to be clear, depending on the industry, it might be 5 years. I mean, if you're
Right.
in tech, I mean, even 5 years is like thousands of years away, it feels like, right? But then some companies, their BHAG's 30 years. Maybe it's more, of a traditional, blue collar factory or plumbing, family plumbing business. And they want to think more generationally, But 10 years is the sweet spot, right? It's very fuzzy. We don't know whether we can get there. No one can argue with us whether we're going to achieve it or not. That's also another point, right? But we're just saying, hey, you want to help us get there, right? Strap on the gear and help us get there. When we look at that 10 year, we can then say, okay, what do we need to do in the next 3 years to get us one step closer to that 10? And everything as we get closer and closer becomes more in focus. And once we've mapped out what that 3 year vision for the business looks like, right? We can then say, okay, what do we need to get done in the next year that gets us one step closer to that three, one step closer to that 10, right? And then
Absolutely.
what do we do next? We say, right, what do we need to get done this quarter to get us one step closer to our one, to our three, to our 10, right? So that whole reverse engineer process gets very clear. Um, the conversation around using a revenue number, for example, is really contingent on what appeals to the team, right? So a financial services company might be all about having a dollar value, assets under management. Like everybody in that organization understands what that means. So that really feels like a rally cry. You may have a commercial real estate company, right? In Texas. I'm in Austin, Texas, right? So your first location here is in Austin, and you want to put on there that in 10 years, we're going to have 25 locations all over Texas. That's what the entire organization can understand. They can wrap their head around from the leadership team down to the front desk. Everyone understands in 10 years, we're going to have 25 locations, right? So it's really what inspires the team. Other teams would be, more inspired about, be the best place to work in the United States within our industry, or we're the go-to company for news channels to call when they want experts to weigh in on an issue, right? So I see it all over the gambit, but it really is what triggers that excitement, that rally cry for the organization.
Yeah, I think, for myself, I have to relate this to myself too in these experiences of setting the BHAG where, I just it seemed too I couldn't even see the mist, right? At the top of the summit. So I had to do one of these other types of BHAGs, to be the Wayne Gretzky of the SEO industry, and I think everyone can see, how he's at the pinnacle of his sport, and that was something that everyone can lasho around and try to aspire to, right? So it's not uh, it kind of is an aspirational type thing, but it's a goal.
Yeah, no, yeah, there is an aspirational component for sure around the 10-year target or BHAG, whatever you want to call it. You, this blower here, sorry.
Zoom. And really, the next thing I wanted to talk about is I'm sure some individuals listening are like, I'm gonna do this myself. I'm gonna self-implement. If someone doesn't want to take the direction of an EOS implementation coach, maybe they're just not ready yet. What are some tips or methods they can ensure that they roll out EOS successfully?
Yeah, so this is a tough one because I feel like as a professional coach, um, I just, if I'm being completely honest, it's really tough to nail any kind of implementation, no matter what field yourself, if you're a participant while on a learning curve, right? So with that being said, you can get a lot of headway by reading the books, joining some Facebook groups. I know they're out there for self-implementers. You can join EOS's Basecamp. There is very many practical tools, right, that you can do, and just getting everyone in the room together and following it to a T gets you ahead of most people. Most people are not doing this, right? But it is very difficult. So
Yeah,
I don't know. It's a tricky one for me to answer, Chris, because I've rarely seen it implemented really, really well. There's always bits and pieces missing.
yeah, I'll say, my ego, myself, I was like, I'm going to do this myself. And I read all the books, I think all six or seven of the books, read them all, watched all the YouTube videos I could, listened to every podcast I could, and it's different. And while I think maybe we did it, let's say 50% of EOS, or maybe even 60 or 70%, though that extra percentage, it just rounds out the entire puzzle. And we take the self-assessment, and your leaders take the self-assessment, and you get to see kind of where you truly are. And I think drawing that extra percent out, every little 1% helps. And I saw that firsthand, even though I myself obsessed, read the traction book probably 3 times, you know all of them, the uh I can't recall the exact names, the Visionary Integrator book, there's just all
Yeah,
6 of them.
rocket fuel, rocket
Rocket
fuel.
Fuel, yeah, and what the heck is EOS is one that we sent out to our entire company. But and even watching the videos, it was just very refreshing to step in and know that, hey, you know what? I don't actually have to understand this entirely, but my coach does.
Yeah. Yeah, what I love is that these concepts are simple to understand, but you can't confuse that with easy to implement, right? Um, it is really tough for you as an owner of a company to read the books, and you're going to be on a learning curve. If you're getting a team in a room together, you're going to be, rolling it out. I mean, how I coached my first 10 sessions is completely different from the way I coach now, right? It's just I've become better at it over time, and you're in those very early days. And it's almost impossible to be the teacher, facilitator, coach in the room and also be a participant. It is. I mean, I have first-hand experience. I'm on the board of EO, Entrepreneurs Organization here, and I also facilitate the summits. Fortunately, my board seat, I have a co-chair, right? So I can actually step out and be the coach and not be as much of a participant. But when I want to jump back and being a participant, it's really, really tough, really tough. I don't want to dissuade anyone from starting to self-implement. If you start self-implementing, you're way ahead of the competition. But I think a big pitfall to avoid would be thinking that you are going to get to 100%. I would say, you know, dip your toe into this. If you're on the fence about implement, or maybe don't have the resources right now to hire a coach, right? Go ahead and self-implement. Like, there are going to be some great things, like have effective meetings, follow the L10 agenda, right? Like, work on your accountability chart, work on your structure, forget about people, work on the structure of the organization, right? For growth, right? Project that out into the future. Do these things, and you're way ahead of the competition. I mean, realistically, nobody is doing this. They're not. I live in a world of business operating systems, EOS, and EO, and we talk about this stuff all the time. It's easy to sit here and think that everyone else is doing it. Like, the tens of millions of companies in the US, like a tiny percentage of them actually use these frameworks, right? So go ahead and do it, but don't, I would say, revisit hiring a coach on a regular basis in your mind. Bring in somebody to do, an introduction or audit your company. We do like self-implemented days where you can come in and audit, and always leave that door open, that there's room for improvement. And then when you find the resources, or you're at that right place in your business, that right time, go ahead and hire the coach, because you'll look back and realize, oh my gosh, we didn't have all these things in place. And now that the coaches come in and helped us put the framework in place like it should be, now we realize, how much work we really needed to get done.
Absolutely. And I think, even for those of you that have read the book too, it doesn't have a laid out agenda for every meeting. Yeah, they have a specific agenda for the level 10 meetings, but when you're thinking about your quarterly meeting in the book, I can't recall like an exact meeting and structure, or the annual meeting. They kind of give some general advice, but in the traction book itself, there's some of those, or the exercises in which you select your core values. It's more of like an outline than the deep dive, having someone that's a certified EOS implementer. So I can say that firsthand as well.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. When Gino wrote the book, right, it was a manual, like a how-to, and it quickly became apparent that companies needed help. it's easy to read a couple of pages about, defining your core values, but then actually getting the team together and doing this effectively, it needs help, right? The process needs help. So that's where the coaching's born. I mean, it's born for a reason. So, but go
Absolutely.
ahead and I will make it very clear. Go ahead, please go ahead and self-implement. You can find the right system for you, follow some kind of process. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. So I don't want to dissuade people. I guess I'm just saying, keep that door open for the coach. Even if it feels like a stretch for you to bring in somebody, just going to help you achieve your goals faster, right? So the
Absolutely.
ROI is going to be spot on.
And I was looking at a few other of the operating systems. So I was looking at Vern scaling up and his
Yeah.
framework, and it just seems for a much larger business. I would say most of the individuals listening are in that, 10 to, I would say, mid market size, or maybe even below that. And when I was looking at Vern's, it was like, geez, this is very technical. And I think the overall um, fundamental EOS model is just more simplified and it's easier to adapt.
Yeah, I mean, EOS has a beginning, middle, end. Um, Very practical tools. It's very, like I said, simple to understand, wrap your head around. Not necessarily easy to implement, but yeah, it's great. And I'll be remiss if I didn't say, I mean, Vern Harnish is a big mentor for Gino Wickman. Like Vern's scaling up is wonderful too. There's other business operating systems out there. You got to find the right one for you, and then find the right implementer for you. So I would say for everyone to take a poke around and figure out what's right for them.
Absolutely. So let's shift over to the personal. So in 2013, you completed an Ironman with just 11 months of training. Do you have any other personal goals? Anything that you're working towards right now? Any other Ironmans in the future?
Well, I'm coming off knee surgery, so I'm making my way back. But I definitely feel the pull to do something, set up a challenge. A couple of years ago with my mentor Jack Daly, we did the rim to rim to rim, crossing the Grand Canyon. I love having those challenges in my life. Um, I need them, to be honest with you. I need I need those reminders of what I'm capable of achieving. As I think, those are kind of my physical, kind of mental resets. But now, 47 years old right now. I've got a incoming senior next year, going off to college. My kids are getting older, and I'm really starting to think about my 10-year window, and a lot of it involves around, continuing, improving my great marriage with my wife, who I met in college. And it's about experiences, setting up my life so I can work from anywhere, and ultimately spend maybe half the year in Colorado, right? So my wife and I were thinking about specifically Telluride, Colorado. So those are kind of my personal BHAGs now. Like, how am I going to architect my life to get to a point where I can spend half the year in the mountains, as well as meet with these amazing teams. Obviously, remote technology is wonderful, but then also thinking about having amazing clients all over the country that I get to travel to. Getting to a point where I can kind of pick who I want to work with, which is a great feeling, and what kind of locations would I be interested in traveling to. So those are, if you look to my own personal vision traction organizer, you'd see a lot of that. Like, working with amazing clients. I know what amazing means for me, so it is a smart rock, and then, yeah, just really having a wonderful life, full of amazing experiences, and physically being where I want to be.
That's incredible.
Yep.
And James, we're gonna go to our final segment here. It is what we call our 3 for 3. It's just a quick fire round, so you can go from your gut, and I'm just gonna shoot these to you. Which habit contributes the most to your success?
Just going back to this theme, my continuous investment in continuing education, whether it's getting coaches, whether it's getting in masterminds. I'm in a mastermind with just amazing coaches, like truly feel like the dumbest guy in the room in many ways. Like, um, that habit of constantly striving for improvement, and actually writing the checks, right? Like, skin in the game kind of stuff is a habit I've developed.
Awesome.
So I'd say that.
Wonderful. And which entrepreneur do you admire the most?
Oh, this is a tricky question. Gosh, there's so many. I mean, if I think back on, um, I mean, certainly, looking at the Richard Bransons of the world, risk taking, like but smart risk taking, it's just amazing what that guy's done. The teams he's built, the companies he's built. Even looking at Elon Musk, I mean, who's just moved to my neighborhood here in Austin, right? Like opening up
Mhm.
Tesla, and to think that guy wakes up every day making decisions through the filter of, does this get me one step closer to colonizing Mars, right? I mean, that's just incredible. And I think about Jack Daly, right? Like he's just, I saw him speak at my first EO event over 10 years ago. Full day workshop with Jack Daly. And for those of you who are not familiar with him, he's just this amazing speaker, workshop sales. Hate to use the word guru, but just he's been around the block, and he's in 72 years old. He's still running marathons, Ironmans. Just an incredible, inspiring person. So it's like all these like characteristics of these people I just admire so much, and I try to blend it in and then shove it into my life as much as I can. You know.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And yeah, I was setting when I was in Vistage. Jack Daly came in as a speaker once, and he was pretty intense. And I still remember some of the things he got on to the room about. I mean, he really commands attention.
Oh, he sure does. And if it's like going to SeaWorld, the first couple of rows, like the splash zone, it's like giddy up. If you're sitting in the first couple of rows, it's like, oh my God, this guy. He
Yep,
just halftime doesn't even have a microphone, just him, a marker and an easel, and goes to town. Like it's wild. So I highly recommend anyone taking their company to visit him.
absolutely. And if you had to recommend one business book, which would it be and why? And curveball, you can't recommend Traction here.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I read a lot of business books, right? But I look for themes that not necessarily business, but you can incorporate it into your entrepreneurial life, right? So, um, big books that stand out for me: Man's Search for Meaning, right, by Viktor Frankl. I
Great
mean,
book.
this is just like it, like just a different way to look at life and suffering and purpose, and it's just one of the best books ever written, I think. Um, a recent book I absolutely love was Bryce Hoffman's American Icon, the story of Alan Mulally taking over Ford Motor Company. Yes, it's a business book, but just getting inside of Alan Mulally's head as a leader, there are many, many lessons in there. And he has his own framework, the Mulally operating system, that is not too far removed from other business operating systems. So it's a great reminder that just come in with a process and follow it, right? Um, there's a book from like the 1940s, Dale Carnegie, How to Start Worrying and Start Living, right? Everyone really knows Dale Carnegie from How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? But this lesser known book, this book hit the nail on the head, like very tactical ways to slow down your anxiety and develop a system to sit down with your problems and systematically address them, right? And it's fundamental foundational things. The guy nailed it in like 1946. Like there's no other book about like dealing with worry. The world would be okay. They just read this book. And then there's other psychological, persuasion books I think are very important, like Influence by Robert Cialdini. Just understanding how the human brain works. If you're in sales, you need to understand the power of social proof, for example, testimonials. And so I look at not one book. I know it's not the quick answer, but it's more of my mental thinking around it. It's like, let's go to copywriting, for example, like the Boron Letters by Gary Halbert, letters to his son from prison, talking about life and copywriting and all this great stuff. And it's just like a gem mine, right? Cialdini, influencing in sales capacity, how to stop worrying and start living. As entrepreneurs, we worry a lot. How can I deal with that, and so on and so forth. And just taking these nuggets from these books. You know,
Yeah, those are incredible, and I'm definitely gonna have to. I've read a couple of those. I read Viktor Frankl's book, and that was amazing. But definitely gonna have to check out the rest. And James, it's been such an a pleasure and honor having you on the show. Where can people go to learn more?
Yeah, you can go jamesashcroft.com or shoot me an email at james@jamesashcroft.com. I'm happy to chat, help out any way I can. And if you're looking for an implementer, I'm happy to talk to you and point you in the right direction or help you figure out what's best for you. If you want to self-implement, I can send you some resources, whatever you need. I'm happy to do it.
Awesome. James, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.